Hello, my name is Mike Shiohama, and I will be covering time and attendance fraud and travel fraud. Starting with time and attendance fraud, there are two areas of concern. The first is staff claiming and being paid for hours not worked. And the second, staff not entering their time contemporaneously is required by LSC Reg 1635. Let's talk about a recent case that the OIG had. This case involved being paid for hours not worked and dealt with contemporaneous timekeeping issues. This case involved a subgrantee ED who was paid for hours not worked while taking classes to earn credit towards a graduate degree. The OIG's review of case management entries disclosed that the hours entered by the ED were made 4 to 6 weeks after the date of the fictitious hours that she claimed. A review of the timesheets, case management records, and payroll records disclosed that she claimed 8 hours of work on her timesheet. Her case management entry supported an 8-hour workday, and her payroll records disclosed that she claimed 8 hours as being worked. The case was made by third-party documents that confirmed her attendance as an intern taking classes. This case resulted in her termination. She was ordered to repay the program and was placed on 1 year of supervised probation. Now for the case study. Based on a hotline complaint, the OIG received an allegation that the office manager for a grantee had paid herself over $100,000 supported by false timesheet entries. Our investigation disclosed that she received multiple paychecks for each pay period. For this program, the ED was the only person who could sign the checks, and the office manager was the person that prepared the checks. It should be noted that the ED signed blank checks for the office manager. To support the extra paychecks, the office manager claimed 70 hours of work each week. It was a grantee's accountant that helped make the case. He confessed that he prepared the false timesheet at the office manager's direction. He stated that he and the office manager came in on a weekend to enter the false hours onto her timesheet. And in return, he was able to keep his job and was given a living stipends under the guise of being a victim on a VAWA grant. It should be noted that the ED also received extra paychecks in the amount of $30,000. The case also disclosed that there was no board oversight. During the entire time of the scheme, which was 18 months, there were no board meetings. As a result of the case, the office manager and ED pled guilty and were ordered to make full restitution. The ED was sentenced to 6 months in jail, and the office manager received 9. Here are the recommendations for time and attendance fraud. Instead of reading the list, I would like to add one more recommendation, and that's having good board oversight to reduce the risk of fraud. Simple things like having the board review the ED's timesheet, travel, and expenditures creates transparency and deterrence. And if the board reviews account budgets to actual expenditures, at least in this case, they would have questioned the amount spent on payroll. Now for travel and reimbursement fraud. The OIG investigates more allegations of travel fraud than any other reported fraud issues. Some issues of travel fraud include, first, travel with little or no business purpose for personal benefit. In this example, we had an office manager who took and was reimbursed for travel so that her husband could compete in a sporting event. She was eventually caught for other fraudulent activities and lost her job. Another investigation dealt with an ED padding her travel claims. In In this case, the ED claimed and was reimbursed for a $400 meal, which included a $200 bottle of wine. This was one of many false claims. On this case, the ED was eventually charged for theft to grant funds. Now we will discuss the case study for Cruising with Leo. Here are some facts from the OIG investigation. Leo was the disbarred attorney and was hired by the grantee as a paralegal to handle VA and SSA benefit cases. Based on interviews, nobody wanted to supervise Leo. So the ED gave Leo a position where he supervised himself. Because of this position, Leo could submit his own travel vouchers to accounting without a supervisor's review or approval, as long as he did not claim lodging or per diem. To support his travel claims, Leo opened a case with the client name in the case management system. It was only a data entry to support his claim. There were no case files. For the 336 days that Leo worked, he claimed mileage ranging from 250 to 700 miles round trip each day. On his reimbursement claim, he stated that he started his workday at 5:30 a.m. and returned home at 10 o'clock at night. No per diem or lodging was claimed. Based on a review of third-party documents by the OIG was able to prove that Leo never traveled to destinations as claimed on his travel vouchers. The investigation found that 1. The grantee had a badge entry system, and a review of the entry system records disclosed that Leo had a card swipe to enter the building on business days around noon. 2. The office also had a telephone system that recognized where employees listened to their telephone messages, and based on the system records, Leo listened to his messages at his office desk during business hours. And 3. The best evidence was an analysis of names used by Leo against agency records that disclosed that some client names were individuals that were deceased, or they had no record of the individual, or they had no record of a claim being filed for the individual. This case resulted in Leo pleading guilty, was ordered to pay full restitution, and was sentenced to 54 months incarceration. And now for travel fraud prevention recommendations. Again, instead of reading the list on the screen, I would like to share one more recommendation, and I call it ROI, or Return on Intake. Based on OIG investigations, there were some cases that involved employees who conducted outreach in the field. Based on our cases, we found very little, if any, intake taken for those events. So you have to ask the question, are you getting the expected intake from your outreach events? To address this problem, there's no problem having the employee add the contact information for each event on the travel claim. If there is no intake or very little intake for the event, or you suspect something is wrong, call the contact and ask, was our visit helpful? If they answer, what visit? There's a problem, and call the OIG. Well, that's it for my part of the presentation. Thank you for listening to my stories.